Okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll get started. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome to Asynchronous Feedback, Access, and Possibility. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us here. My name is Miriam Akervall. I'm a teaching assistant at the Writing Center at the University of Idaho, where I'm also a grad student in the MFA program in creative writing.
Hi, and I'm Emma Perry. I'm the current interim director of the Writing Center here at the University of Idaho. And just want to echo Miriam's thanks for being here today, especially at this time of the semester. Folks on the semester system, good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can, okay, great. Figure out how to do slides and talk at the same time. So I'll give us an overview here of what we're gonna do today. First, we'll do a little bit of introductions, thinking about who's here in the room with us. And I see folks are already sort of putting some of that information into the chat. So that's great. And then we're going to take a poll. We have a discussion question to get us started. We want to hear from you about your associations with asynchronous feedback. We'll talk a little bit about our context here in Idaho, in northern Idaho, where Emma and I work at the Writing Center, and what our experiences have been with asynchronous tutoring. And then we'd love to have facilitate a little bit of discussion between you all. Um, and we'll wrap up by sort of sharing from those discussions and getting out of here with a few toolkits and takeaways for y'all to bring back to your own writing centers, in case this is something that's of interest to you in your spaces. Finally, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And that's what we got for you. So gonna jump in here. So our first discussion question is gonna be in the form of a poll, and all this QR code will take you to the poll, and I've also got a link that I'm gonna drop in the chat here. One second, if I can find it.
I've got it too. I can just
Oh, you
pop
do?
right in
Okay,
there.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll give folks a second to respond. Please let us know if you can't access this poll for any reason. I'll just pull up the other screen here.
You should just be able to hit skip on that credit button there. You don't have to register. You can just hit skip on that.
Okay, so as people are putting up their responses, I see our word cloud here is being updated. So I'm just going to pull that up for all of y'all to see. So this is great. It's changing quickly because there's so many of y'all. This is wonderful. We're seeing that people's associations have to do with access, complexity, positivity, standards, time consuming, miscommunication.
Service keeps kind of floating over the middle of the cloud too. Yeah.
Yeah, feedback, time.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, access is becoming a big idea here too.
Totally. Offering. Yeah, barriers.
Hmm.
That's great. Yeah, we just wanted to share this with y'all because asynchronous tutoring is something that is sort of at the sidelines of writing center work sometimes, and there are a lot of barriers to doing it well, um, and sometimes barriers for students to access it. And so we wanted to sort of explore that a little bit today, starting by plumbing our associations with it as providers, and also what sort of hurdles get in the way between providing the service for writers. So thank you so much for doing that with us. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint here. And Emma, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so we'll start with a little bit of our particular writing center context here. So the University of Idaho Writing Center serves both in-person students who attend UI here in Moscow, Idaho, as well as a wide range of distance learners. Some of these distance learners are current students who are enrolled in programs throughout this sprawling Mountain West state. Idaho is ginormous. These distance programs are located all throughout the state, from Coeur d'Alene in the north to Boise, and from McCall to Idaho Falls. So in addition to working with our current University of Idaho students, our Writing Center also works with high school students across the state who are enrolled in dual credit courses to give them a head start on their undergraduate degrees. So our distance learners in Idaho tend to access Writing Center services through a mix of synchronous and asynchronous appointments administered through WC Online. Our dual credit students access our services exclusively through asynchronous feedback. They upload their work to WC Online and receive feedback via email attachments. We've also been working exclusively asynchronously with students who are enrolled through Idaho's Prison Education Initiative. The Prison Education Initiative, PEI, you'll hear us probably using that acronym. The PEI extends the opportunity to pursue a bachelor's degree to folks who are currently incarcerated in state facilities at Orofino, Pocatello, and Boise. Students enrolled through PEI don't have access to all of the online resources and platforms that our non-incarcerated students have. For example, they're prevented from accessing WC Online. Instead, all of our Writing Center interactions with our PEI students take place through an online learning management system, and UIdaho uses Canvas. PEI students submit work for feedback to a Dropbox on Canvas and receive feedback from one of a roster of tutors who meet the conditions set by the Idaho Department of Corrections for working with incarcerated students. IDOC, the Idaho Department of Corrections, requires tutors also be instructors of record during the semester in which they're tutoring. And IDOC requires that tutors attend a training on working with incarcerated folks every year. This semester, we have 5 Writing Center practitioners working with PEI, including the 2 of us.
Yes, and so I'll start by sharing a few examples of some of the exchanges we've had with our students in the PEI program. I've been a tutor with the PEI program out of the Writing Center for a little bit over a year now. So through the PEI program, we work with writers who are enrolled in 2 facilities presently. That might be expanding in the coming year. But for now, we work with the Idaho Correctional Institution in Orofino, which is a men's prison, and the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center. So during this time, I worked semi-consistently with the same handful of students. We see a lot of returning clients and students who are consistently enrolling in classes every semester. To me, this experience resulted in some of the same benefits that repeating appointments usually enjoy in face-to-face settings. We practice building trust, we encourage risk-taking, we confront difficult topics, and we observe growth over time. So the first example I want to point out is my time working with Tammy. This was one of the first students that I met through the PEI program. Tammy was enrolled in Introduction to Creative Writing, or English 290, at Pocatello Women's Correctional Center. And I first encountered her work through her poetry and later through personal creative essays. Because Pocatello's Women's Correctional Center is notoriously underfunded and limited in terms of connectivity, Tammy had a really hard time accessing our platform, Canvas, and enough broadband to load and upload her assignments. So what we ended up doing is that Tammy would email her submissions to the Writing Center, who would then email them to me. So the Writing Center director would email them to me. I would write feedback. I printed them out. I would handwrite feedback on them and then scan them and send them back. So this was time consuming for sure, but an unusual occasion. And I came to really cherish this exchange. It felt a lot like letter writing. I got to connect with her work on sort of on a slower scale. And her poetry was deeply emotive. She wrote a lot about her children. Her essays focused on legal advocacy work that she'd been doing as a mentor in PWCC, to her peers. And Tammy's work ended up inspiring what now is going to be the PEI Writing Center Creative Writing Journal, which Emma will talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. So this is just one example to highlight that we have sort of a unique opportunity to engage with writers who are doing really complex and intricate work. And sometimes we have to be a little bit flexible to access it. And one challenge that can arise is the issue of how to address a difficult subject matter when you don't have that face-to-face connection to soften the delivery. This came up for us in the case of another student's writing, and this was Ron from Orofino. So Ron, oh, sorry, I never changed the slide. Oops. Okay, here we are. So Ron wrote a short story that included several instances of implicit bias and incorporated some sexist and racist stereotypes. And I'm honestly surprised that this hasn't happened more because we are in Idaho. So you'd be surprised how many hard conversations come up in the classroom. But this was really the main instance that I could think of. So this was an opportunity for us to practice initiating conversation versus sentence level feedback. So first I met with my cohort of PEI tutors and brainstormed ideas for how to reply to Ron. And after some conversation and following the advice of my peers, I decided to take a slightly more personal approach. So I started by sharing my experience as a reader, where I was feeling alienated and whether or not that was the intention of the piece. Ron ended up editing the story, and while it wasn't entirely free of some of these expressions of bias, it did seem that he was understanding where I was coming from and considering his language in a new light. So through this interaction, we realized the importance of the tutor community, especially when confronting a challenging moment. Yeah. And then my last example is that every writing center has an appointment all-star who knows everyone and can't seem to get enough time with the tutors. And so for our PEI program, this is Matt. Matt is also from Orofino and working with Matt has taught me about the potential of long-term relationships through repeating asynchronous appointments. So when Matt first started submitting work to our portal, he would submit one sentence of instruction saying that he wanted help with flow or punctuation. We see this a lot with rec students of all sorts, right? But his use of commas were particularly sporadic, and the sentences would sometimes break unexpectedly, sometimes running for a whole paragraph. Through multiple exchanges, his confidence in the rules of sentence level organization grew, and eventually he wrote a beautiful science fiction piece in which I could almost find no punctuation errors at all. And now he asks questions in his comments when he submits pieces. So after months of practicing, reworking, and learning on the page, Matt gained a more confident grasp of grammar, which opened up a more nuanced understanding of his own writing. And also what kind of feedback that he wants from his writing center tutors.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. And we are using pseudonyms for all of our students just to protect their privacy today too. Yeah, so we wanted to build on the students' enthusiasm for their writing projects, as well as our own enthusiasm for supporting and facilitating their creative work. This enthusiasm has generated an ongoing project to publish a literary journal online and in print that showcases student creative work in a professional venue. So this fall, in partnership with the Prison Education Initiative, as well as with the Idaho Department of Corrections, we're soliciting student submissions and providing feedback toward readying these submissions for publication. This winter, we're going to finalize the portfolio of works to be published and design the digital and print publications. We will, oh yeah, cool. After printing in the early spring, we look forward to hosting a reception for the launch of the journal, both in person in Moscow and hopefully online with our incarcerated students. Additionally, we will be sending physical copies of the journal to all the facilities where our authors currently reside, so that this publication will be more easily accessible to our remote readers, as well as our in-person audience. So in this way, the Online Writing Center not only has bridged support services into carceral contexts here in Idaho, but it has also become a bridge over which our students can send their writing into the wider world.
Thanks, Emma. So looking forward, this conversation about asynchronous exchange, the PEI Creative Writing Journal, this all got us thinking about the possibility for asynchronous tutoring to grow at the University of Idaho. We believe that these services are currently underutilized. So for example, while we might be working with one or two students in many of our remote carceral locations, we have yet to connect with most of our distance learners. As the University of Idaho grows its online degree program, University of Idaho 360, which you saw on our third slide, um, supporting writers will become more of an online concern in the future. Additionally, our online services and asynchronous tutoring in particular have become essential tools for increasing access to support. Student writers who identify as neurodivergent or who are impacted by mental health considerations may rely on asynchronous services more than a non-impacted student. This might run counter to some dominant narratives in writing center pedagogy that we prefer face-to-face in-person interactions. However, through our work with the PEI initiative, we have found that for students who can't access in-person services, asynchronous feedback was a really meaningful way to communicate about their writing. Asynchronous tutoring can be a really important resource for students, as well as a way to build student identity and community across a distance.
Cool. So for our first discussion question, we invite folks to think for 2 to 3 minutes and to write responses into the chat. Here's the question. What is asynchronous tutoring like at your writing center? And how do you feel about it? What is asynchronous tutoring like at your writing center? And how do you feel about it? I'll put that in the chat too. This is great. Thank you.
I'm getting a broad range of responses here. Somebody used, I think it was Ryan, said a drop-off paper service is how it feels at his university. We can definitely understand that sentiment. Another place said that they didn't have asynchronous tutoring. I'm seeing some people find it a really meaningful way to engage with non-traditional students, accommodating busy schedules.
Yeah. Brian says 75% of the sessions over the past 2 years. We're asynchronous, providing ways for medical and pharmacy students to utilize the Writing Center while being away at rotations. Yeah, interesting. I'm interested in all the different platforms y'all are using to do this too.
Mm.
Yeah, didn't seem to work for some folks. Yeah.
Some people limit the number of asynchronous appointments that they can take each day. That's interesting.
Yeah. I have a tutor at Goucher College who is also saying that more could be done to promote the service as it's underutilized. Yeah. More labor intensive than kind of regular. Yeah. Well, and I'll also be interested to hear if someone's willing to kind of put their voice into the space too and tell us a little bit more about asynchronous tutoring in your local context. That'd be great. Yeah, we're seeing kind of like a split. Some students are really enjoying the asynchronous affordances and availability, whereas the tutors kind of think about it a little bit differently too.
Joni says they block off tutors for an hour for asynchronous appointments, so that affects the rest of the schedule. That's similar to what we do here.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm. Yeah, does anybody want to expand on their experience? You could raise your hand if you want to share with the group.
Yeah, Luke, go for it.
Hey, yeah, wanted to jump in. I hope others will join too, because there's such interesting conversation in the chat, and I'd love to hear more about that in audio if people are comfortable. Um, so I really appreciate this so far, and really interested to see the ways that this is asynchronous tutoring has been applied in prison education settings. Excuse me. That's one reason I'm here is to learn more about that. So talk more about that another time. But I actually have a couple of my tutors in the session, so I'm interested to see if they would expand on this too. But I guess the central tension we've been talking about recently is maybe how to best frame expectations for students and the sort of limitations of that modality, as well as the opportunities that it presents. It feels like we need almost, really specific outreach or like class visits just to address how best to use that resource because we do really want to make sure students know it's there and it's accessible and it is this benefit that they get. But we frequently run into situations when I talk to tutors that are like, I really wish I had a follow-up, to talk this through or could see them in person or those sort of things to overcome some of those limitations to communication and clarity. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I think it's a really valuable resource. We offer it just alongside all our other modalities. There's no real distinction in how it's scheduled or anything. It's just up to students, and largely that works pretty well. I do think sometimes that's a little disorienting for tutors because you'll just be switching between modalities frequently, and there's the ever-present problem of is this really a written feedback tutorial or am I actually going to find this person on Zoom or what have you. But I do think it's really valuable. It's something we've done for a long time. We had phone tutorials prior to the kind of COVID era, stuff with a better system. But yeah, just how to talk to students about it, how to build that understanding before they submit, ideally.
Yeah, that's a great question. Joni, I see you have your hand up too.
For sure. So I can kind of speak to that a little bit because what we do at UVU is a little, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little different because we offer with our async video, it's our async feedback is async video feedback. So essentially, we have it set up so that when a patron signs up for asynchronous video feedback, they have to upload like whatever they want us to look at, but also the assignment so that the tutor can actually understand what they're getting at. Our intake form is pretty extensive and they have to check some boxes of here's what I want you to focus on. But we also have some limitations on it where we say, if your paper is longer than 5 pages, we can probably only look at about 5 pages. If you want feedback on a particular part, please indicate what part that is, and things like that. But the main thing is that it's I think students understand it reasonably well. I think the most important thing is the like kind of consistency from tutors, like the need to have still agenda setting during a video because we make a personalized video that can range anywhere between, 5 to 7 minutes, where we, like in a normal session, set the agenda, say, here's what I'm going to go through, do a screen share so that they see the comments as the tutor is talking about what they noticed in the paper. So it still has that kind of like voice, I'm showing you things element, but it's a little, it's asynchronous. But it's still personalized, And so it's an interesting setup and we've had it going for about a year and a half and we're getting to the point where we're kind of like audit isn't the right word, but we're doing some like quality control checks of like how is this working from the tutor end because it's pretty popular with students. We're an open enrollment university and we have a lot of adult learners and like just working students full time and so it's useful for that. But yeah, we set the parameters on the intake form. And usually if people don't upload what they are supposed to, or they're not meeting the parameters, an office assistant will give them a call and have them do that. So our writing center is really big. So we have a lot of staff who are doing that stuff. Anyway, I will stop now.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Tony. There are a few questions in the chat too, just about the whether or not kind of video response modalities were accessible and students found them helpful. So thank you for speaking to that. Yeah, Laura, and then Santa.
Yeah, so our asynchronous feedback service is unfortunately probably the true for many people, right? Very underutilized. So we only have bandwidth for, we've got a couple professional staff members who field that. So our kind of on-site tutors are under the bulk of my graduate ones. They aren't trained on it, but one of the things that we try to be very intentional about is in the onboarding for our on-site crew, telling them about this service, but also having them be really informed about like why this serve or what are maybe the benefits of this service and how it differs from the synchronous offerings that we have. Right, telling them because some students are going to ask about it, or they may encounter students who have questions and say, like, well, when should we use which? I think is another thing that students often consider, or they think asynchronous is just going to be easier, or where it's that drop off mentality where they're just going to, I just submit my paper and it'll come back fixed, right? So we really talk about, which students benefit most from asynchronous versus synchronous feedback, and how those kind of dynamics differ for the feedback that we deliver and how we deliver it. Mostly thinking about, are they more independent learners? Do they feel a little bit more confident? Do they know some of the composition lingo, right? How much of that gets used without or we use it a little bit, I won't say thoughtlessly, but kind of like, we all know what thesis means, right? So sometimes we don't have the student in the moment to say, hold on, wait, can you explain what a thesis is? And so they need to have a little bit of that meta language already kind of in their repertoire to be more successful, I think, sometimes with asynchronous feedback. But that just kind of depends on who your audience is too. But so I think the intentionality of how the service is framed and whether students are aware of the differences and all of that is a factor to consider.
Yeah, that's great point. Thank you, Laura. I'm also noticing in the chat, a lot of back and forth. So thank you for sharing your resources with each other too. Somebody mentions, or it's interesting to see these different platforms that folks are using. The LMS options that we use for our PEI work, our Prison Education Initiative work, are also required by the program and by our school because of those privacy concerns. So just kind of like responding back to Amy in the chat there. Thank you. Santa, what were you thinking?
I'm the tutor who works under Luke, and I think one of the things that we find missing in this whole asynchronous process, especially at our institution, is that we don't get any feedback from the tutors themselves. So we're not, at least the only way you have a sense of a tutor, of a student maybe benefiting from the work that you are responding to is that maybe that student continues coming to you, sending papers to you. But I, when I heard you talking in terms of, I think it was Matt, one of your tutors, who's able to build relationships, that is certainly what's missing. But if you have a student who is constantly coming to you, you're saying, okay, I'm getting something right, possibly. And so that I think that's one of the biggest problems. Also at our institution, uh, for instance, I do primarily virtual tutoring and the written feedback. And I kind of like being able to go back and forth. But there are a number of tutors who prefer not to do written feedback at all. And they find it frustrating, and I certainly can appreciate that. But yeah, I think, how do you build a relationship with students, or at least how do you know you're giving them what they need? That is what I think is missing in our asynchronous approach, that I don't know if I've been able to really help that student because I don't get any feedback from the student. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as Writing Center practitioners, we all love that moment at the end of the appointment where, it's very clear that this has gone well and this has been helpful. And there definitely is, at least a delay on that with our asynchronous students. But that has been one of the things that we've really been impressed by with our back and forth exchanges with our PEI students. Their availability for that conversation and their willingness to check back in with us too. We've also had folks just sort of either share drafts, not for feedback, but just for letting us know, like, thanks for the input, here's how it came out. Yeah, and also the commenting features in Canvas have allowed them to even just leave a little note of thanks sometimes. So that's been how we've kind of approached that. Because yeah, I think that is one of the big questions with asynchronous tutoring, how to recreate presence and how to recreate, your personal interest, that person-to-person contact. Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering whether like using video or other media-rich feedback would help the relationality piece. Yeah, making it personal. There's definitely a person, a person kind of in the video there. Great.
Yeah, these are such great considerations. And I like how the conversation has been like fluctuating on both sides of the table. Like we're thinking both about tutors and the energy required for written feedback and switching modalities, and also thinking about students, like how do we evaluate the feedback that we're giving and whether or not it's efficient or effective or helpful for the receiving end. Yeah, this is so great. I think for our next discussion question, we would love for y'all to go into breakout rooms, and I think Libby's gonna put us all into our groups, and we'd love to hear y'all think about what are the needs of your clients at your writing center or on your campus. How are you meeting those needs right now, and what do you think where are you seeing gaps? How might asynchronous tutoring fill those gaps? So we'd love for y'all to talk about this with each other for a few minutes, and then we'll come back together.
Apologies to my group. That happens to me every time. It's definitely a me problem, just getting raptured back into the main room mid-sentence. So I thank you for your conversation. One thing that came up in our group was how difficult it can be to enact presence in an asynchronous environment, given the fact that we're also, we exist alongside sort of AI tools or AI powered tools who can also do some of this sort of editing focused work. Yeah, curious to hear what else people were thinking. Okay. Oh, there's Miriam. Hi. All right, so we'd love to share some of our tools and also collect some takeaways and some tools from you folks as well. We have a shared document that I will post a link in the chat to. In this document, we have some tools and takeaways, and would also love for you to contribute some of your ideas from the discussions you've had in our groups too. Yeah, it's actually, Miriam, if we could pull up the shared doc and kind of look through that too, that'd be great.
Can you see it okay now?
Yeah, that looks awesome. Thanks. So some of the things that we were kind of thinking through, finding ways to incorporate collaboration into your asynchronous feedback can help build community for writers and tutors. I think that's something that we found. Oh, Marilyn, thank you. Article recommendation in the chat. So building community around asynchronous feedback and even building some collaborative elements into that really helped assuage some of the feelings of isolation that it sounds like a lot of tutors can feel. Yeah, we also, especially last year, we've been a little slow this year, but last year we found it useful to have several meetings specifically for tutors working on PEI and working on asynchronous exclusively with these, with our distance learners. In order to debrief and troubleshoot some of the particular issues that come up around this type of writing center work. It's slightly different from in person, and so we have slightly different conversations. Yeah. Yeah. Miriam, what are you thinking? I'll let you take some too. Oh, it might be muted still.
I knew that was going to happen.
It always happens at least once. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still thinking about something we were talking about in our group, which is maintaining attention on protecting the tutor's time also, because with written online feedback, it's really easy for things to sort of slip into and across the workday, but setting specific appointment times to focus the tutor's attention on providing higher order feedback for higher order concerns. And then when that hour is over, that is the end of the session. So treating it sort of like a face-to-face interaction in that way. We also talked about like expectations, setting expectations for turnaround times. So depending on whether or not you're able to make an actual appointment for the asynchronous exchange, maybe your turnaround time is longer. For example, at our writing center, it's usually somewhere between 3 to 5 days for our PEI students because they're accessing this resource through Canvas and not through our appointment schedule. For other people, it was anywhere between 36 hours to 12 hours to 1 hour. So also something to keep in mind, setting expectations. But yeah, and also here reading up from our doc, I think in the feedback itself, really important to establish, like to sort of maintain our writing center pedagogy, right? Even in our written feedback for an asynchronous appointment. So establishing like a supportive tone, focusing on like broad, maybe a few bulleted key takeaways that are of critical importance to the piece rather than like marking everything up. And just, yeah, sharing excitement about the piece. Yeah.
We did, and Miriam, when you were talking about having difficult conversations asynchronously with some of our students in PEI, that I think was a moment in which the potential to recreate your personhood kind of in an asynchronous context in writing became really, really important and was something that I think happened really successfully. Yeah, kind of bringing an embodied experience to your feedback. As a reader who is situated the way I am, here is how I experienced your work. And I wonder if if encouraging folks to think on how they might do that in their asynchronous tutoring as well could be really powerful. Great. Oh yeah, and thanks to folks who are adding some tools in here too. Setting appointments for tutors, clear expectations for turnaround. That's great. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Miriam.
No problem, but we would love to hear more. Please go ahead and drop something in the document that you thought was useful from your conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I love that idea, closing time. Um, yeah, just helping people to kind of set some of those time boundaries too. We also do a 45-minute appointment with a 15-minute client report form, take a break, get a drink, kind of a structure too. And in our small groups, Lisa, I believe, was talking about coaching folks to just be done when you're done too, and just kind of note, oh, here's where I stopped. I didn't get further. Yeah. A lot of folks have been thinking, I hear us all thinking a lot about how to establish clear expectations for asynchronous support too. One way we did that through our PEI, the Prison Education Initiative collaboration, is we have kind of a greeting page that people have to navigate before they can submit their work that just sort of introduces our approach, what to expect, who is reading your work, that kind of a thing. And I hope that that's been helpful. It certainly kind of helped troubleshoot some logistical issues, and I'm hoping it also has an effective outcome as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Emma, because it made me think of another thing, which is that we always introduce ourselves as well in our asynchronous feedback. And that's, I think, a really important piece of that, like how to maintain some of that personal connection and treating the exchange like we would any other appointment, whether that's by inserting sort of a global comment at the top of a PDF or right in the comment box on Canvas, for example. I'll usually put a comment at the top of the page that just has, my name and the things I'm really excited about in this piece, and then a little bit of some major constructive questions or something like that.
You're welcome to grab the notes from the screen there too. This is meant to be yes, meant to be available to everybody. Feel free to take away the takeaways. Yes, Luke, that's on Canvas for the PEI. Lots of great recommendations for Beth Hewitt's book, The Online Writing Conference. That's what we're looking at in my tutor training course today. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I'm also really excited to maybe try some video stuff after kind of speaking with folks who've been finding success there. I feel like that could even be a really engaging addition to that landing page. Just having a little video. Hi, we're the Writing Center. I think that could be a great way to remind folks that there's a person on the other side of the exchange, of the writer-reader exchange. Great.
I wonder if while folks are adding some tools and takeaways, we might segue into questions. Are there any questions folks have that they want to talk about or work through together? Feel free to raise your hand or drop a question in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Jillian. We've got a question. Curious how much more time adding video to the asynchronous feedback process rather than just written feedback for the tutor. Yeah. I know Joni had to run, but if somebody else has any experience with this would be a new technique for us. So I'd be interested to hear somebody else's response.
I'll second that request because we were looking into possibly doing screencasting along with our, instead of just written feedback. So if anybody uses something like that, either a screencasting or a video share or even a audio recording along with written feedback, something in addition to that. So if anybody has advice, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I can speak briefly to that. I mean,
Thanks,
I guess
Dustin.
it'll have to be brief. There's only 5 minutes left, but yeah. So our asynchronous writing consultants team about 2 years ago started using what was called Screencast-O-Matic at the time, but is now called ScreenPal to make audio video. So it's a screencast of going through the feedback, but then you have a voiceover over it. And when we first started, there was a steep learning curve. It took some time, but we've been doing it about 2 years now. And on average, we produce 5 to 7 minute videos, and it takes us about 10 minutes. And that's including doing speech to text captioning for accessibility. And the captioning, I mean, it's not great, but you can run through it real fast and fix the major errors that would, impede comprehension or just make it not make any sense. It's not pretty captioning, but short answer, it takes us about 10 minutes. And we do these videos on top of our marginal text comments that we also provide. And the way we share the video is by linking it in the introductory comment that we have on the in the marginal comments. It'll just be something like, and here's a short video that I'd like you to watch, giving my general impressions or giving you some more ideas to think about. And then they can click on that. The students can click on that and it shares the video with them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it took some time. It took some work to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, Ronnie also says in the chat that there's a bunch of recording equipment and that the directors in their writing center require everybody to take time in their shifts to practice to kind of speed up that or kind of get over the speed bump with new technology there. Great.
I see Luke is wondering a follow-up question. Does anyone offer video enriched async feedback as a distinct option from text-only feedback? Dustin's shaking his head. So this is the only option for your asynchronous tutoring. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so all of our tutors, they always give the marginal comments and the video. A brief caveat to that, if it's something like a diagram that a students want feedback on, and it's like some kind of visual diagram with different variables and the relationships between them, we can't really do marginal feedback on that, so we'll just make a longer video. So I guess, and sometimes yes, but in general, with typical documents, we always have the written feedback and the screencast video as well.
Cool. Yeah, I see Karin also has notes that they use Screen or Loom, I guess, is the platform they're using for grading or giving feedback in classes they teach. It's actually, I've heard from instructors that it can be very time efficient instead of time consuming to do a video. Yeah, great. And Libby has a survey for folks in the chat. Thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, if you could take a second to fill out the survey, that would be fantastic too.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Marilyn. I appreciate that. Yeah, I hope y'all have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thank
you very much.
Happy midweek, mid-semester, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.